Okay, I'm going to bang the gavel and start the meeting. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Lenox Public Schools School Committee of March 22nd, 2021. I expect we'll still have some additional people joining us. And Melissa, you'll keep track of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, kind of smart because we
Yes.
are, still missing a couple of school a couple of school committee members. So the first thing is if there are any visitors who'd like to make any public comment at this point. Christine Cass has her hand raised.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Thank you for recognizing me today. I just wanted to give a quick statement. Christine Cass, 8 Maple Street. I have 2 children in Morris, and I'm also a member of the Lenox Finance Committee. I am one of the 2 Finance Committee members assigned to work with the schools on their budget for this budget cycle. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself and my colleague, Michael Fetter. We have attended meetings to discuss the school budget with the School Finance Subcommittee, Superintendent Cameron, Business Administrator Falkowski, and also reviewed the budget materials in depth. I sent a letter documenting our finding to the school committee this morning. This is a year for austerity. The pandemic has had significant impacts on our town revenues, and there is still a lot of economic uncertainty regarding town revenues in the upcoming year, and many residents are struggling to pay their property tax bills. As a result, the select board and town manager requested that all town departments propose very lean budgets for fiscal 22. The increases in the 22 budget for other town departments are very modest and only for necessities. And the Lenox school budget does not show the same austerity. The proposed school budget represents an increase of 4.8% over fiscal 2021. Even in a normal year, that requested increase is staggering. Over the past 6 years, the school budget increases have averaged about 3.1%, so 4.8% is well beyond the norm. Usually, a significant portion of the school budget increase is due to increases in the benefit costs, which are out of the school's control. But this year, the benefits rate is flat at a 0% increase, which makes the requested 4.8% that much more troubling. We are deeply concerned about the school budget as it stands. If this budget is passed tonight, the town is left with several bad options to find the additional funding. Those options may include cutting from other department budgets, which are already very lean this year. This might mean cutting a much needed police officer role or other important spending. Another option might be delaying contribution to the town employee retirement fund, which just kicks the can down the road and will negatively impact teachers in the long run since their retirement benefits come out of that town fund. The third option would be to pass increases along to the residents in form of higher property tax bills in a year when so many people are facing significant economic challenges. We believe that the better option is to revise the school budget and for the school committee to approve a budget with a more typical increase of 3% or less. We hope that you will seriously consider our concerns and take us up on our offer to assist in improving the budget. We stand eager to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Anybody else for the public comment? Seeing none, I'd like to move on to correspondence. We have had 3 pieces of correspondence. One from Christine Cass and Michael Fetter, which we'll be getting to later in the meeting. We had a letter, and I believe that everyone on the committee received this, about school curriculum.
Mr. Chairman, you have a person in question and answer.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sophie is.
Hi, Anthony Patella. I apologize. I wasn't able to switch Sophie's laptop. Just wanted to see if I have an opportunity to speak briefly.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Anthony Patella, 133 Housatonic Street, Lenox, Mass. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to Mr. Kneibel, Mr. Cogswell, Mr. Pugh, the school committee, Jeff Ano, the maintenance staff, Stefan Phillips and his wife, the coaches, and many other individuals that really gave our student athletes an opportunity to compete in a sanctioned, safe MIAA activity, specifically the short basketball season. I also want to thank Dr. Cameron for his efforts and his support. It's really much appreciated. This was just such a welcomed and much needed opportunity for our children, our student athletes to get together to play in a safe environment that I believe has allowed them to grow and really just their mental health. I think I noticed an impact with my own kids. And so the smiles on their faces and the smiles on their friends' faces, that really goes a long way. And I really thank you for all your efforts to keep our children safe, to implement protocols and procedures, and to always ensure that you're doing the best you can for our student athletes. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. I hope we continue down this avenue with the spring and into the summer. But again, just my heartfelt thank you as a parent and as a supporter of our student athletes in Lenox. So thank you all. I appreciate it, and continued success.
Thank you, Tony. So going back to the correspondence, we had, in addition to the letter from Christine Cass that we'll address later, we had two other pieces of correspondence. One from Ellen Loftus, which I believe she sent to everybody regarding concerns about the curriculum, and specifically a poem that was used in her 10th grade English. The poem was Howl by Allen Ginsberg. She's concerned about it, and she hopes that, as time goes along, the Lenox schools will, plan to present both sides of all different issues. And she has had a number of children in the schools, and is concerned about, some of the directions that we might be going. We also had correspondence from Sherry Butler, which I believe we all had too, regarding basketball. And it was concerned that there was a parent who was seen standing for the entire game at one of the games, I guess, and concerned that other parents didn't have that option. Those are all, things that, would be addressed administratively. So now let me just find my agenda here, see where we are. So that's the correspondence that I received during the last few days. Moving on to the board report, we have the school committee meeting minutes of February 25th. And that was, as you'll recall, the meeting where we met to discuss the sports, reinstituting the basketball. So I would accept a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from, I'm blanking on the date,
February 25th.
February 25th.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien.
Anne Marie O'Brien, saying I wasn't active.
Oh, you weren't, okay. Francie Sorrentino,
Nancy Sorrentino, aye.
David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Holly Elliott, aye.
and Bob Vaughn, aye. And then the school committee meeting minutes of March 1st.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes of March 1st.
Thank you.
I'll second them.
Okay, second, David Rimler. Any discussion? Hearing none. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Francie Sorrentino,
Nancy Sorrentino, aye.
David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Holly Elliott, aye.
and Bob Vaughn, aye. Okay, we'll move on. Somebody's got to mute because we're getting a lot of feedback. Superintendent's report. Dr. Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 4 items I want to address during this evening's superintendent's report. First, I wanted to give the school committee and the public an update on the building remediation taking place at Lenox Memorial Middle and High School. As you well know, probably too well know, we took steps in response to issues that had arisen in particular in recent weeks, but with regard to what was reported to be possibly asbestos compounds that had been used as a fire retardant when the original building was constructed in the 1960s. We contracted with 2 firms, one an air testing firm that we've worked with before, the other firm that specializes in asbestos removal, which is headquartered in North Adams. And based on the initial information we got from the contractors, we believed that we would be able to resume instruction tomorrow. That was a hope, but it was not an irrational hope, at least at that time. It has since become evident, as we've been in touch with the contractors, that the scope of the work is greater than they had thought, and that the process for proceeding is moving at a slower pace than we had thought. And therefore, we were advised by the contractors that they expected to need the entire week, this week, to complete the work. We have a week from today, students will be in remote instruction. And so counting today, they will have had 8 days more to proceed with the remediation work that we certainly do hope is over and the building is ready to occupy by a week from tomorrow. At this point, I can't make any promises. We are monitoring the situation. I know that the Commonwealth has had an asbestos removal monitor there twice to observe what's going on. And we believe that the work is proceeding. I would only point out that none of the air testing that we've had done indicated any health-related issue posed by what caused us to address this problem. The readings were all exceptionally low, well below what the state's standard is for post asbestos remediation occupancy of a facility, which is itself lower than the OSHA standard, higher than the OSHA standard. So we're taking extraordinary precautions here to ensure that the students and the staff and visitors to the school are safe. But I wish I had better news, but I don't. The second item I have, Mr. Chairman, regards the reopening of school. As you well know, and I'm sure everyone in the community knows, the Commissioner of Education, through a somewhat complicated maneuver, has demanded that all elementary schools in the Commonwealth resume instruction in person and full-time by the 5th of April. We've also been told by the commissioner that who has gotten the authority not to order schools back to session. He doesn't have that authority. What he has is the authority, because the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education gave it to him recently, is the right to discount or to disregard days of instruction that take place other than as the commissioner directed, and therefore put some portion of Chapter 70 aid in jeopardy if there isn't compliance with what the Board of Education, the governor, and the commissioner want. So we are proceeding on the assumption that our elementary school, Morris Elementary School, will be open full-time and in person on the 5th of April. We are furthermore working with the secondary staff, the administrators, and also with the cooperation of the LEA, which has been very helpful in these meetings that we've held so far, to develop plans that the school committee can approve for the resumption of instruction on April 5th. So the April 5th planning is well advanced. And that is Principal Brenda Kelly and I are going to have a meeting tomorrow night at 6:30, Zoom meeting with any interested parents or members of the community for that matter, any interested parents or members of the community who want to find out what the plan is and to ask questions. We'll need to know how many parents are intending to send their children back to school so that we can finalize the plans. And it's not reasonable for us to expect parents will say, yes, we're coming back, or no, we're not coming back, unless they have their questions answered. So we're going to give everyone an opportunity to pose questions and get them answered. We can't answer them tomorrow night. We'll get answers post haste and disseminate them to the entire Morris community. So everyone's getting the same information at the same time. There is a plan to have a meeting for the LMMHS parents and students, if they wish, and other members of the community. The date hasn't been set, but it will be next week sometime. The third item, Mr. Chairman, is the approval by the school committee of the Student Opportunity Act plan, which I submitted to DESE in January, and which they informed us recently it required a school committee vote. And the plan that you have is actually more detailed than what I submitted to DESE, but I wanted the members of the school committee to have sufficient background so that they understand what the request is. The request is to address, through the acquisition of new instructional materials that will focus, that will not have as their sole focus, but certainly they're the primary beneficiaries would be special needs students at Morris Elementary School. That plan does require a vote of the school committee. And Mr. Chairman, if the school committee wants to wait until the end of my presentation here, or if you want to take the vote now, that's certainly the chair's prerogative. You're muted, Mr. Vaughn.
I think this would be a good point to jump in and see if the committee has any questions and have a motion to accept the Student Opportunity Act document that Dr. Cameron's prepared with special regard for special ed students. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the plan?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the Lenox Public Schools Student Opportunity Action Plan.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
I actually have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Or actually, perhaps more comments and questions, or just some clarifications. Essentially, as relates to some of the specific components of the mathematics, the reading, and the writing components, you know, I think that these are all great tools and great plans. My one question or comment really comes about the bookends, basically, of those plans, sort of the ability to feed into them. In other words, it's great to have these plans in place, but I think what's perhaps even most important is being able to identify on a timely basis and as early as possible those students so that that would benefit from these plans. And on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I just had a comment because the plans are all Morris-centric, but a number of them go through 8th grade, and I think some actually go through 12th grade. So my question really just is what happens at the other end of it? Does Wilson follow through into the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? Same with, I think perhaps the numbers went up to 12th. I'm not sure. Those are just my kind of basic questions I was interested in.
I think that Ms. Dion, the pupil services director, is here to speak specifically about the materials, if in fact you have questions about that. But with regard to the general issue that Mr. Rimler is raising, there is nothing prohibiting us from using the materials at upper grade levels. Most of these programs, I believe, are bought in segments so that Wilson has a comprehensive program from basically those who are initial readers up through students into high school who are having difficulty with reading. I believe that our primary emphasis is going to be on Morris, but that doesn't preclude us subsequently acquiring materials that would be useful in the upper grades as well. I'm making a commitment here only to DESE, only to Morris, partly because we're not receiving a red cent that's going to pay for this. And other districts, needier districts economically certainly than Lenox, are receiving, as the state is shoveling money at them through the Student Opportunity Act. They have a lot bigger problems, generally speaking, in terms of student achievement than Lenox does. All that said, what we're going to have to do is either use the COVID money that we're getting to cover the cost of this, or take it out of the regular budget. So I have no opposition whatsoever to broadening the scope of this if in fact these materials prove to be highly effective. The only one I'm personally familiar with is Wilson, and Wilson is a remarkably effective reading program, especially for students who are having trouble mastering comprehension or phonics or whatever. And so I would be delighted if in fact we were able to extend that into the upper grades. There is a good deal of professional development that's necessary probably for all three of these. But again, the one I speak about with some knowledge is the Wilson program. And there is a certification program to make sure that the people using it are fully adept at its use. And we do have a teacher in the district right now who could be reassigned to Morris to begin that program in September.
Thank you, Dr. Cameron. Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of answered my question, because I would think, talking about Wilson in particular, should there be a need for it, say, for a student through 5th grade, you would not expect that all of a sudden in 6th grade, there wouldn't be. And that's just based sort of my point.
Well, if I could, just one of the things about Wilson that I know from experience elsewhere is that it's an effective reading program, regardless of whether a student has an IEP, if the student is encountering difficulty reading. All students who have difficulty reading are not on IEPs, but there are students who do struggle with acquiring reading skills. And I know for a fact, although there was some opposition from, not here, please understand that, I'm not talking about Lenox. There was some opposition from the special education department in a district that I was in because I agreed to put selected students who were not on IEPs into groups of that were being instructed with Wilson who were on IEPs. And once we got over that bump, there was a very quick turnaround in some of the students' ability. It can be a very effective program. So that's a long way of saying we should extend it as far as we can go, but we would need probably more teachers than we have right now who are in a position to use it effectively.
And if I can,
You may.
we do have 2 teachers at the middle and high school that are certified Wilson teachers that have gone through the training. And like Dr. Cameron said, we have an additional one. So we have currently right now, I believe we have 4 or 5 teachers.
Any
Yep.
further discussion?
Yeah, Dr. Cameron, I just need I guess I don't really understand what this is about. I read through this information and it sounded like Massachusetts has put forth this Student Opportunity Act and it's targeted at high needs populations, of which we don't have enough of in Lenox to qualify. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So what is
Principals,
this
I could just-
plan? So we're putting together a plan to address a population that we don't have?
We don't, it doesn't turn up as on the district's accountability report as a group that it is, has substandard performance. And that's because it's done grade by grade and the numbers in the grades here are too small to identify. We don't have large populations in each grade of students who fall into any of the so-called high needs categories. But we do have students here who struggle. And that's what my intent here in bringing this plan forward is to address. Now, the Commonwealth's approach to this has been, I'm speaking here from my experience. I'm not trying to state what the principled intentions of the Student Opportunity Act were. I'm not trying to characterize them, but the Commonwealth's focus in revising the Chapter 70 formula, which is really what's driving this, was to put a great deal of additional money into very high needs districts.
Mhm.
Pittsfield is getting a lot, Lawrence is getting a lot, New Bedford and so forth. Districts that do not have substantial populations of high needs students are not getting anything except a sort of general all-purpose $30 per student increase in Chapter 70 money. So we are nevertheless, even though we don't turn up on the Commonwealth's radar as having underperforming groups of students, we are expected to submit an SOA plan, a Student Opportunity Act plan. And so that's what this is. It's in conformity with a mandate from that's part of the statute that was adopted in 2019, changing the Chapter 70 formula. And the intent of that, I know that this for a fact by talking to state representatives, the intent of having this targeted focus is so that schools don't just take the money and add it to their operating budgets and spend it on things that do not represent, at least for the legislature, the greatest needs that schools have. So
I understand that, I guess, Dr. Cameron, but I guess where I'm a little confused is if we don't have the population and we're doing this plan, and we're going to commit to spending money on new programs, I have sort of 2 questions there. Why are we spending the money on the new programs, number 1? And number 2, why is it we weren't self-identifying these populations and doing more with them on our own?
Can I answer that, Dr. Cameron?
sure.
Yeah, so even though this didn't come up as a We didn't get identified because of our numbers were too small. Having worked for the department for years, if you dig down into the data that at the school level, you can determine things about your school that maybe don't show up in the accountability numbers. And in fact, this was something that came up, I believe, a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. It might have even been when Tim Lee was the superintendent. Where they recognized that, given the numbers we had at Morris at the time, that they were concerned about the special needs population, and or some of the high risk population at the time. Not enough that it showed up on our accountability numbers, but enough that at the local school level there was concern. So it has not been something that has been totally overlooked, but it doesn't come out as a major flag unless you dig a little bit more deeply into the data.
So we're reacting to the Student Opportunity Act prod? Or we already knew this and didn't do anything about it?
Well, I'm reacting to the Student Opportunity Act prod. We would have submitted this last year, but for the fact that because of the turmoil created with COVID-19 and closing schools, they kept pushing the date for submitting a plan back. I agree with what I think is the thrust of your query, which is, why did we wait for this? Why weren't we looking at ways that we could improve the programming for underperforming students, and particularly students on IEPs? Why weren't we doing that right along? This gave us an opportunity to do that. I can't speak to what other administrations may have had as their priorities, but we should always be looking at improving instructional programs, and especially for those who need the help the most. I agree with your sentiment. So this has given us an opportunity, even though we're not getting money from the state to do it, it's given us an opportunity to put some additional resources into what we think will be effective programming for students who are having difficulties in reading and writing and math, or some one or several of them. I should say that the writing program was put on hold. It was supposed to be piloted last year, and it was in the process of being piloted, and then the roof caved in. And so what we're doing is basically restarting this pilot program to see how effective this is. If I understand correctly, when Mr. Bockley was the principal there was some extensive investigation of more effective writing programs. The principal and the faculty themselves identified writing as a particular need to focus on. So we're just taking an opportunity here to restart something that was already beginning.
Okay, I appreciate that. And yeah, that was the thrust of my question. Is there any downside to approving this plan? Does it lock us into a particular curriculum? Do you have to revise it every year? What is the obligation that goes along with this?
I'm not aware that this plan has to be revisited every year. It seems to me that what they're looking for from all districts is a commitment to expend funds to provide better services to students. The state has not announced any evaluation procedure for determining whether the funds are being, whether what the funds are being spent on is highly effective or not. There is a requirement that they be research-based. And so that's one of the things that made us pick these. They're all research-based. I was talking to Mr. Rimler a moment ago about Wilson is a very well-established and highly respected program. The other two are newer, but the publishers have published research data about their effectiveness. So we have to determine whether that holds true for us as well.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Francie Sorrentino,
Francie Sorrentino, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Molly Elliott, aye.
David Rimler,
David Ribler, aye.
and Bob Vaughn, aye. Okay, Dr. Cameron?
The last item I have, Mr. Chairman, is to inform the school committee of what we're proposing for student athletes in the rest of this school year. I've been notified by the superintendent in Lee, with which we have a cooperative football program, that Lee is requiring that its student athletes in football be pool tested for SARS-CoV-2 virus. And we therefore either are going to exclude our students from playing, which is certainly not my intent, or we will have to comply and have those students participate in pooled testing. It seems to me that it ought to be a requirement for students who are participating in athletics as a condition of participating that they cooperate in pooled testing. They're all going to be in situations that involve greater physical activity and closeness to, I may be overstating the case with regard to golf, but the other sports that we're going to have up and running, cross country and trying to think what the four of them are: cross country and certainly,
Crew?
well, no, soccer
And volleyball.
and volleyball. Thank you. Those involve frequently close contact, and people are breathing heavily and so on. And so it seems to me that for the fall 2 sports and also for the spring sports, we need to have students participate in pool testing to make sure that the opportunity for the spread of the virus, if it's there, is minimized. We can do that right off the bat with football because there's a very small number of students who are participating in football. There are only 5, I think, 5 or 6. In any case, logistically, the kinks have not been worked out of how we're going to do this. And of course, everything is made more complicated by the problem at LMMHS, where we don't even have kids there in cohorts. So we will work out a plan, and I'll be happy to make it public to, certainly will have to be made public to families and so forth, and I'll share it with the school committee. But I don't know that this would be especially controversial. I think it's a necessary precaution as we try to get back to more normal educational activities, to make sure that, because the virus is still around, that we try and take whatever steps we can to minimize the opportunity for people to transmit it. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Cameron, do you want to talk about the days at Morris, the half day on the 30th?
Oh,
and
yes,
the
yes.
on
Thank you
first?
for reminding me of that. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a quick question on the pooled testing. Do we have to, as a school committee, make a vote on that, or is that?
I mean, if you told me to stop doing it, I would stop doing it. But I'm telling the committee so that it has an opportunity, if it wants to say, no, don't do that, to tell me that.
I guess I support it. I think playing athletics is a joy, but also a privilege. And it's important to everybody do their part, especially in contact sports. So
I think it's a very sensible proposal, and I also support it.
So if there's no discussion, further discussion, if I could just address Ms. Falkowski's point. She reminded me of what was discussed this morning at the administrative team meeting. Miss Kelly, in order to ensure that we can open on the 5th of April with the least confusion and the most orderly procedures, has asked that we take remind me, Melissa, I know that it involves moving the PD day that's scheduled for the last work day of this teacher's work year, moving that forward as a day when teachers would be expected to be at work, but students would not be present, and taking one additional half day to prepare for the reopening. There's a lot of physical work that teachers need to do in order to get ready for full classes, or as close to full classes as we're going to get to come back to school. And so the LEA had actually proposed that we do that it turned out it was not necessary, that we do that at the very beginning of the remediation process at LMMHS last week. So what it would involve is a half day of hybrid on, I think it's the 30th, is that correct?
Yes.
And then Thursday, the 1st, I believe it is, would be a day when students are not in school, but would be used by staff members to prepare for the resumption of school the following Monday. The reason it's Thursday is that the school calendar gives that Friday off. It's Good Friday. And this reminds me that there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about that I should have brought up under the school reopening. I don't mean to dominate the meeting. I know there's an extensive conversation that has to take place on the school budget. We're confronted with a situation, or we will be when school reopens, of parents who have indicated that they want their children to be back in school, and parents who indicate that they prefer their children to stay in remote learning. There may be parents who want to opt later to get into remote learning, to get into in-person learning after the school year, after the resumption on April 5th. It's my view that people will have to make a decision that will stay in place for the rest of the school year. If we have to continue to accommodate people, which we have done, and we've done it knowingly and willingly, for kids to come to school some days and then they learn remotely other days for any number of reasons. Our reopening is going to require that we have at least 2 teachers who will be teaching students who are exclusively remote learners. And we need a firm number for that. It seems that the number is going to be fairly low at Morris, but I don't see how we can accommodate people coming in after they said they weren't going to come in. It would require reorganizing the instructional groups. Kids would be switching from one teacher to another. It just seems to me that it's introducing an element of disorder that is not going to well serve anybody. So if I'm just saying that unless the school committee prefers otherwise, we're going to tell parents tomorrow night and again at LMMHS, that meeting, that if you opt to come back, great. If you opt to remain remote, then that will be your status through the end of the school year. If you don't respond to the inquiries, then you will be learning remotely. You will not have said you're coming back remotely. So because we need to know definitely what numbers we're dealing with here in order to do this properly.
Are there any questions for Dr. Cameron on any of that?
I would just comment that I support that and think it makes sense. I think it's important that, we keep things functional, and in that way you have to set certain deadlines. So I very much support that.
Okay, and before we move on to the new business, I did want to take an opportunity, we were able to accommodate a short basketball season, and we'll now be starting fall 2 and spring sports shortly. But I do want to say for all of the athletes out there who, this has been an unusual year, and there are many people for whom, particularly seniors, for whom their shining moments would have come this year in whatever sport they're playing. We had some junior athletes last year who were right at the very top of their game, and this would have been their chance to have really made a mark. And statewide, of course, tournaments were stopped, and we couldn't go to full participation in the fall, or even in the early part of the winter. But I do want to acknowledge that we had many people for whom many students for whom this would have been an outstanding opportunity to finish their high school careers with, a chance for their moment in the sun. And that didn't happen. And not just the athletes, but the fact that we didn't have a fall festival, that we didn't have the art show at Norman Rockwell, that we didn't have a school musical, that we haven't had the choral and instrumental concerts, and the woodworking displays that are done. There are a number of opportunities that we have throughout the year to see great student performances or examples of their work that we've missed this year. And for that, I just want to indicate that I'm really sorry that that's happened. There's nothing we could have done about it. But I want to acknowledge that, particularly for those seniors for whom this would have been their last hurrah, so to speak. We feel, it's unfortunate that this had to happen during your senior year, and we recognize that we as the public missed out on some great performances, but you all missed the opportunity to really shine and show what you can do in so many different areas. So just wanted to express that. The new business, let me just explain this a little bit, and maybe that'll be enough, and maybe Kim will want to jump in if I don't express this. But Kim Dion is preparing for the coordinated program review that will take place in the fall, but she has to prepare documents that she has to submit in early April. And one of the ones that she needed to do was the homeless policy, which we actually adopted quite a long time ago. I think maybe 15 years ago or so, or more. But there've been changes in it. And the major change was that they took out a section relating to foster care, or just a sentence relating to foster care, and then created a separate policy on foster care. So what we need to do so that Ms. Dion can submit these documents to, when she submits the documents on April 8th or 9th, we need to formally approve these documents so that it goes on record that the school committee has these in their policy manual. I don't know if I've expressed that well enough, Kim, but if not, go ahead and add to it. Or not. So I guess I would accept a motion to adopt the MASC homeless policy JFABD.
Sorry, Bob, I guess I was on, I don't know, I guess I was on mute. I just wanted to really briefly just say that some of the changes were a result of ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that's the reasoning for the changes that are noted.
Yeah, they originally came out of the No Child Left Behind, I believe, and then
Yes,
with ESSA, there were the changes.
yes.
So let's do these separately. Is there a motion to accept the homeless policy JFABD?
Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the homeless students policy JFABD.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Nancy Sorrentino,
Francie Sorrentino, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Molly Elliott, I.
David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
and Bob Vaughn, aye. And similarly, a motion for the foster care policy JFABF.
I'll make a motion to accept the foster care policy JFABF.
I'll second that, Bob.
Thank you. Any questions? Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Francie Sorrentino,
Francie Sorrentino, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Molly Elliott, I.
David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
and Bob Vaughn, aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have a parent asking a question for clarification on the half-days that Dr. Cameron had just previously spoke about.
Okay. So the question is, can we circle back to the half-day and full day off next week for Morris students? Will these days be made up in June? I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, one of the days, it's simply pushing the end of the school year for students out one day by moving the teacher's PD day, which is a day when students wouldn't have been in attendance because the school year would be over. That day will be taken from whatever the date is. I think it's April 1st. It will be taken from April 1st and moved farther out to at the end of the school year. So the half day will be actually, I believe will be a full day for students, but it will only be a half day in school. Ms. Kelly will clarify this. She'll be sending out a message to parents about this change, and it's simply to facilitate the resumption of full-time in-person instruction on the 5th of April.
I believe the half-day would be a half-day for students.
Would it?
Yes.
Okay, well, then it's a half-day for students. I appreciate the thrust of the parents' question. I'll get clarification on that.
It looks like Principal Kelly is in the panel.
He is.
I moved her in.
I'm misspeaking.
Good evening. So March 30th would be a half day of school, which will count as a full day of school. The students in the AM cohort will have classroom instruction, and the students in the cohort B will have their specialist and any interventions and any other assigned work. And as Dr. Cameron just mentioned, the last day of school was a professional development day, the last day of school after the students dismissed. The entire Lenox Public School faculty had an extra day after all the students left. We are moving that to April 1st to prepare the site to receive all the students for April 5th. Any questions?
Okay, hearing none. And thank you for the clarification. Hearing none, we'll move on to the budget hearing. And I do want to mention, this is the formal budget hearing, that culminates the work of several months of the administration preparing a budget, presenting it to us, on 2 or 3 nights in January and February. Opportunities for discussion at subsequent meeting in early March. And now this is the night when we typically would approve some number to go forward to the town meeting, whatever that number might be. And also an opportunity for the public to ask questions if they have any questions. We did receive a letter from Christine Cass and Michael Fetter regarding the budget. They are the representatives from the town finance committee to the school committee. And, they've done an extensive review of the budget and had, a number of concerns and questions that they raised. They sent some of these concerns to us this weekend. And in preparation for that, for tonight, Dr. Cameron, Melissa Volkowski, and I, the town manager, and the chairman of the selectmen, and Molly Elliott met this morning to discuss the concerns that were presented by Mr. Fetter and Ms. Cass. And so our intent tonight is to have a presentation about the budget. And then at the end of that, we have several courses of action. We can approve the budget as presented. We can approve a budget at a lower number or a higher number. We can, just as a matter of timing, Dr. Cameron, Melissa Volkowski, and I are planning on meeting with I believe, the full finance committee on Thursday evening at 5. And that, I think, maybe more typically would have come before the approval of our budget at our budget hearing. It didn't happen to come that way this year. We were given a couple of dates, and this was one of the dates to work with. So, one suggestion has been that perhaps we actually don't take the final formal vote on the budget until our April 5th meeting, that we have the budget presentation tonight. If we're prepared to vote tonight, fine. If not, then we can do the actual vote of the final number on April 5th, and that will still meet the town manager's timetable for needing to get it into the town warrant, assuming a regular town meeting on May, whatever it would be. That may or may not, I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but we have to be prepared a couple weeks before the warrant goes out so they can get it into the warrant and go further. So whatever number we come up with, either tonight or April 5th, will be what will go forward into the town document. And I did want to mention that Mr. Fetter and Ms. Cass, had looked at some very specific areas that had some increases that were a little bit higher than most areas. And when we meet with the finance committee on Thursday, we'll be prepared to talk about those areas. But why don't we go now to Ms. Volkowski's presentation? And are you going to put that up on the share all?
Yes, I'll share the screen now.
Thank you.
First I want to talk about the 2021 budget and the total amount before benefits. And if you look at that first column, I've broken it out by program area. So we have elementary, secondary, special ed, other school services, central admin, operations and maintenance, and then the reserve. And the reserve or contingency fund is for any unanticipated expenses that may come up during the course of the year. And it's typically been about 1% or so of the budget. So last year's total was $12,538,507. When we started the budget process this year, the preliminary budget that was brought forth in January the dates in January and perhaps even early February. The total preliminary budget gross amount was at $13,096,889, which was an increase over fiscal year 21 of 4.45%. The next column over is the final recommendation, and you can see there's some changes, an increase in elementary, decrease at the secondary level, increase in special ed, and so on, bringing the final budget number to $13,093,744, which was a 4.43% decrease over fiscal year 21. And some of the reasons for the changes were there were additional library hours needed at the elementary that were unbudgeted previously. There was an additional retirement notice at the secondary level. And so there was a savings there with a replacement teacher. And an additional para is needed in fiscal year 22 in special ed. And we also had, that's a smaller increase because we also had a retirement date that was moved from mid-year in fiscal 22 to June 30th of fiscal year 21. So there won't be that duplication of personnel for a few months in the next fiscal year. So this slide shows the increases by program area year over year. So the gold is fiscal year 21, the blue is fiscal year 22. So you can see that there are increases in all of the budgetary areas except for other school services. There's a slight decrease there of about $4,000. And that is because there's a paraprofessional position that will not be needed in fiscal year 22. So a portion of that salary was removed. This slide shows where we were for the fiscal year 21 budget, and then the preliminary and final, and then decreases for each. But it also adds the insurance benefits. The insurance benefits include active employees and retirees that are proportioned to the school district. So in fiscal year 21, we had $3,191,527. This year we have $3,260,000. And that's a number that the town will give to us. And it includes any active employees that are retiring this year will move to the retiree. So there's typically always an increase regardless of whether or not there's a premium increase. And we haven't seen a premium increase in insurance benefit costs for approximately 3 years. It could be almost 4. But we're seeing an increase in the amount because the number of retirees simply get added to the pool of people who need benefits. So you will always see an increase there. Adding the benefits to the fiscal year 22 budget recommendation, in the preliminary, we're at 14,501. In the final, we are at 14,444, which is a decrease of 56,770. Now, this number does include any receipts. I failed to mention that prior, but if you look at the second line, you'll see that there are receipts listed, and these are receipts that the school district has access to, such as school choice, circuit breaker reimbursement fund, athletic receipts, facility rental receipts, things of that nature. And part of the 1.909 million includes a portion of the ESSER 2 grant, which is being used to offset some of the expenses in the budget. The ESSER 2 grant was received in March of this year. So that shows that the funding increase year over year, 2022 to 21 was 5.2%, and the final budget is 4.78% at this time. This is sometimes it's helpful to see in a graph form where the money is going, the operating money is going. This does not include grants. It does not include any other funds that are not included in the the operating, which is mostly grants in this case. And you can see that the secondary, the middle and high school is 46% of the budget. So special ed is 16. Central admin is 6, operations and maintenance 8, the reserve is about 1%, and elementary is 22%. So that's really where the money is spread out. The programs that it's spread out through. The projected offset revenue for fiscal year 22 are the receipts that are listed on the slide a few slides back. School choice receipts, non-choice receipts. This is tuition, students from other districts tuitioning in for programs that we offer here. They'll pay a tuition for that, pre-K tuition. Circuit breaker, that's the special ed reimbursement fund, athletic receipts, and other. Now the other includes miscellaneous receipts, small amounts, plus the pandemic relief fund offset of $60,000 from the ESSER 2. And that brings the budget at this point to 14,444, 549. I can try to answer any questions that people may have.
Okay, so before we get, deeply into this, the meeting that we had this morning with the town manager and chairman of the selectmen, in following up the concerns that had been raised by Ms. Cass and Mr. Fetter, we asked them, where, they felt we should be budget-wise. And they felt pretty strongly that we should be trying to get closer to the 3% mark, which, we're at 4.78 or 4. I think it's 4.78 right now. And each percent of our budget is about $137,000. So we're approximately 245,000, almost 246,000 above 3%. Dr. Cameron, Ms. Falkowski, and I and Molly had some discussion this morning about, what we might be able to do to see if what we could do to try to reduce the budget. And after lengthy discussions, we felt we could move, perhaps we could get a third of the way from where we are. Perhaps we could come up with 80,000 of the 245,000. And that's just a rough number. I mean, we didn't have any hard and fast numbers, but we thought we might be able to do that. However, in talking with the town manager and chairman of the selectmen, they felt that, well, that's great, that we should, there was a lot of sacrifice in the town over this past year. 14 people were laid off from various town departments. They're in the process of bringing people back. They didn't always fill every position. So there were a number of concerns that there was a feeling that we may need to do our part to get closer to 3%, and that may mean, or it's clearly up to the administration to figure out how to get to a lower number. But the clear feeling was from the leadership on the town side that we needed to make an effort to reduce this number more than the 80,000 or so that Ms. Falkowski and Molly and Dr. Cameron and I had identified this morning. So we don't have a hard and fast number, but I just did this afternoon. I kind of looked at things to see, if we had to get down to 3%, that would be 245,869. If we wanted to get to some number like 3.25 or 3.5 or 3.75, then it would be obviously smaller amounts. But significant amounts to get us down to, even to reduce a percent would be 140, to reduce a percent, it's 137,000. So I bring that forward, I bring that information forward because I think that I haven't talked to Melissa since, and Bill, since we had the discussion this morning as to what might be a target number to be looking at. If it's not going to be the 3%, is there a different target number that we should be looking at? Perhaps 3.25%. And so we haven't had that discussion, but tonight we either will be voting on a motion to go forward with our full budget, go forward with a reduced budget, or push off the decision-making and let the administration come back to us with a recommendation for a number at, after we've had a chance to meet with the finance committee on Thursday, and when we meet again on April 5th. So at some point tonight, we'll need a motion, or either a motion for a budget number or a motion to move the decision-making on that to our next meeting. So that's just to kind of lay out the options that we have at this point. So I'm going to open it up for any discussion at this point.
Mr. Chairman, it is interesting to me that there is this gap between what the finance committee feels like and what the staff and administration have put together. I do think it probably needs some more analysis and research into, and probably not, this meeting is probably not the forum to be doing that. It's mathematics, and you need to sit down and understand what the numbers are when you look at them. So I think to that end, I'd like to make a motion that we vote to postpone this budget decision until the April 5th meeting, did you say?
I believe so.
Yeah.
April 5th.
The next meeting. Yeah. And
I
maybe
will,
not-
no
Go ahead.
second. Oh, sorry, Bob. I'll wait till you're done.
I'm done.
Oh, I was going to second the motion.
Okay. Yeah, and this is open for further discussion. So anybody who'd like to jump in with a,
Well, I mean, in seconding, what's on my mind is I echo Bob's thoughts. I mean, I think the gap is noticeable between where we are today with what we've put forward as our budget and the questions or the view that's been shared with us by our finance committee representatives. Also hearing about this morning's meeting, it seems evident that gap is also apparent in our discussion with the town manager and the chair of the select board. So I think those are points that we need to recognize and work to understand. I find it personally pretty compelling hearing about the recommendation from this morning's meeting that we get closer to 3%. I mean, I think it's very difficult. It's been an extraordinarily difficult year, and I don't think any of us would want to make cuts to the budget, but I also recognize that other town departments are doing so. I think we as good stewards of a large part of the overall town budget need to do likewise. And I don't think we should stand apart in that sense. So whatever other departments are doing, I would say we should also, in my view, be in a similar position in terms of making cuts to our own budget, whatever that means, unfortunately. So yeah, it sounds like the finance committee meeting this Thursday is a good opportunity to explore some of the specifics there. And we'll have time in the interim to actually to look into this offline. And then I would be hopeful that if we come back here on April 5th, we'll be in a better position to approve a budget at a slightly lower level.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? I do want to say that we've been fortunate over the last, I've been here a long time. We haven't always, our budgets our initial budgets have not always been the final budgets by any means over the 38 years I've been here. However, in recent years, the budget numbers have come in very tight and have been voted in by the town. All 38 years that I've been here, the budget has been approved pretty largely unanimously. It's important to us that we go into a town meeting with the support of our finance committee and our selectmen. We could probably get a budget through without that support, but I don't think that speaks well for, I think it's a lot better if we go in with the goodwill of all the people that we serve. And that's our finance committee, our selectmen, and all the townspeople. I think the cuts that we will have to make here will take us away from a level services budget and get us down to more of a level funded budget. And so there will be things that will be lost in this process. Exactly what those are, the administration will help to identify once they've had a chance to, over the next 2 weeks, to wrestle with this at the principal's level and the superintendent's level and business manager's level. We will, I will certainly be meeting with them during this process to help see precisely what it is that's going to be affected. But there definitely will be, there will have to be undoubtedly changes to the way we operate that we honestly haven't had to do in 20 years or 10 years or some lengthy period of time, which is unfortunate. But given the tenor of what's happened this year, I think that we have to play the role as Christine described it, and be supportive of all the efforts that the rest of the town has made to hold the line. I will also point out that we did return a fair amount of money to the town last year, and we'll return some money this year. I don't know in what magnitude it'll be. But unfortunately, that money that we return doesn't get subtracted from it goes back to the town. It helps the town out. There's no question. But it was a budgeted number, and we can't go in with a budget expecting every year that we're going with a budget that we think is what we need to cover all of our expenses for the year. And sometimes we don't spend everything, and we can turn money back. Last year, because of COVID, we all of a sudden were able to turn 300,000 back. That's very unusual. Normally, it might be in the 100,000 range, but we can't count on that. And so we can't go in with a budget and say, well, yeah, but at the end of it all, we're going to give you $500,000 and life will be good. It doesn't work that way. So we need to let the administration come back with a proposal that will get us somewhere closer to 3%. And then we can further discuss that in April.
Mr. Chairman, I do think it's crucial
I've lost you, Francie.
that everybody's on the same page. Thanks, Mr. Bias.
I didn't.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but maybe speak a little softer and maybe it'll be easier.
Speak a little softer or louder?
Softer.
It's the internet connection. You can't run that microwave.
Oh, I can hear you nicely now.
It's all crucial to be all on the same page, but I keep remembering in a previous meeting, we had a selectman telling us, spend the money, let's go, let's do this. You want butts in the seat and this and that. We all have to be on the same page, and we have to embrace and have the same method. That's all methodical. We have to really grasp. We have police departments that are struggling. We save nickel to nickel to get fire trucks. It's not right. It comes to borderline of greed. But you can only skimp so much too and still offer everything that they're asking us to offer. So when we go into this meeting on Thursday, let's make sure that the chairman of the selectmen is on the same page. And Mr. Fetter's telling us to cut, and he's telling us to spend, and we're hanging. So that's it. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Bob, I'd like to just make a point. This is such a difficult time for municipalities, and I guess what's difficult about it is that there are certainly areas of our budget that I feel are significantly underfunded. And I think that there are specific areas that I've spoken of in the past where I feel that our school system, if it's to be considered a growth driver for the development and future of our community here, that we need to make sure that we maintain a budget that meets the expectations of people who move here and can be attracted here. That said, I can reiterate the areas where I feel we are in some ways underfunded. And I also feel that there are specific needs within the structure of our school that need to be addressed. As I pointed out in the past, I certainly feel that there should be a separate principal for the middle school versus the high school. I feel that the needs of 12, 13, and 14-year-olds in the same academic environment as 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds is something that we woefully do not address. I feel that in previous years, I've questioned the unusually low numbers of students in special education. And I know that at times there has seemed to be a need for a curriculum director in our, in the district. Now, I'm not saying that all of these things should be addressed here, but I think something needs to be said that if Lenox hangs its hat on the quality of its school system, and I know that there's been some question about that, regardless of published report or in spite of published reports, I think it's pretty simple to understand that well-funded school systems tend to have better performance outcomes than ones that aren't. So as we look at this, my point is our kids have been through an extremely difficult year. As you alluded to, Bob, there are kids and activities who, while we just passed our 1-year COVID anniversary of a shutdown, there are kids for whom the experience has actually been 2 years. So I guess in closing, all I'm going to say is I would hate to see programs cut that at the end of the day hurt the quality and the experience of the education. of our students? And I guess we'll find that out in a few weeks.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion on the table, which is to move our budget, final budget decision-making to April 5th? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Molly Elliott, David Rimler,
Nay.
Francie Sorrentino,
Francis Sorrentino, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye. It's a vote. Okay, so April 5th it'll be. And I guess at this point, we're ready for a motion to adjourn. I don't see anything else on my agenda list.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Anne Marie O'Brien,
Anne Marie O'Brien, aye.
Molly Elliott,
Molly Elliott, aye.
David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
Francis Sorrentino,
Francis Sorrentino, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye. We're adjourned, and thank you very much, everybody.